Welcome to the Fantasy Femme Fatales podcast. Today we're talking about The Everlasting by Alix E. Harrow. As soon as this book came out, I was seeing 5-star reviews absolutely everywhere, praising the book for the juiciest yearning and the most immersive story. So today we're here to break down whether it was truly worth the hype or not. And joining me on today's episode is the lovely Libby. You may know her as Bookmarked by Libby on Instagram and TikTok. Libby and I are both huge Kylie Snow fans, the author of The Lies of Lena, the Otation Chronicles, if you don't know. And we connected through Kylie's street team. Since then, we've been chatting books and getting to know each other. Libby is a true romance girly. She's obsessed with dark romance, contemporary romance, and books that will emotionally destroy you. So if that sounds like your vibe, you should definitely check her out. Her socials are linked in the show notes. Libby, why don't you say hi to our lovely listeners?
Hi.
Thanks for being here, Libby. I'm excited about this one.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So, fair warning, we might hurt some feelings today. I'm really glad we have each other because, unfortunately, The Everlasting was just not our favorite hyped book. And we were actually just talking about this, how hard it is to do an episode talking about a book that just didn't really hit for you. But that's exactly what this series is all about, is being real about these hyped books we see everywhere and what our experience was, so you can decide if they're worth your time. And if you didn't love it, then maybe you can feel seen in this episode too. So as always, we're going to have a spoiler-free section up front. We'll talk about our experience and help you decide if you want to read it. And then we'll get into all of the spoilery bits. So keep an ear out. We will give you the spoiler warning and let you know all the reasons why we felt the way that we felt. And if you like what you hear, it would mean so much if you would hit that follow button. That way you won't miss an episode. And at the end of today's episode, I'll be announcing the next Quick Lit book pick. This is a hyped read from last year that has a sequel coming out real soon. Drop your guesses in the comments. We'll see if you're right. And without further ado, let's get into it. Libby, are you ready?
I'm ready.
So we will start off with our spoiler-free sections. I'm going to do a really high-level recap of what The Everlasting is about. I always like to do my take on the blurb because I feel like sometimes they're a little misleading. The Everlasting is the story of a historian, Owen, and a legendary knight named Una. These are two characters that get entangled together and used as pawns to serve the kingdom's needs. This is a story of an enchanted book and the opportunity to rewrite history no matter the cost. It's a story of death and new life. Our main character, Una, is sacrificed time and again to serve the needs of others. And it's a story that asks the questions, what is the cost of immortality? What is the meaning of love? And when is sacrifice worth it all? Libby, any spoiler-free bits that you would add on to that?
No, I think that's perfect without spoiling. Yeah, I think there's a couple of twists in there that I feel like if we were to dive into it now, it would ruin it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's describe the book a little more like broadly. So first off, The Everlasting is a standalone. I love a standalone. It's like a fantasy fairy tale kind of vibe with a strong romance plot, but I wouldn't call it romantasy. What about you?
I wouldn't either. I think the romance is forward. When I compare it to a different, more popular romantasy, I do feel like the romance is really, really heavy. And this one you have to kind of work into that because it's part of their love story. It's not right off the bat. I feel like there's so many different terms, romantasy, fantasy romance, or whatever. I would say it's more fantasy romance only because it takes a minute. But the romance is also a main part of the story. I mean, it's the whole point of the book.
Yeah, I agree with you. I kind of don't like the term romantasy a lot for that exact reason. It's like down to its definition, it's this like 50-50 fantasy plot, romance plot, which this would fall into that category. But the feel of this story to me truly is like a fantasy with like a fairy tale kind of feel.
Yeah.
But the romance is like critical for the plot, but it's just not, given the majority of books in the romantasy genre right now, it's just not the same.
No, it's not at all. I think like in common romantasy, it's almost right away that you know where the love interest is, and not that they can't build up on that because it's not right away, but the way that this was written, you know, they're working through that. And I don't know, it's very different. I liked it in that aspect. It is a lot different than typical romantasies now. If I had to say, I would say fantasy romance more so, even though it is a romantasy. It's so hard.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's just like a good example of how that genre got created and there can be
Hmm.
some problems with it because certain things don't fit that should fit and other
Yeah.
things don't fit that kind of hit those notes. So, yeah, no, I'm fully with you. I was thinking about this book afterward because there was something familiar about it, and I'm curious if you'll get this connection. But the romance in the story and even like the character dynamics of the two main characters really reminded me of The Princess Bride, but like
Okay.
without do you get that reference?
I haven't read The Princess Bride. I was trying to think of something, and maybe it's just time travel wise. Like I read Our Infinite Fates last year,
Okay.
and I also did not vibe with that one. It's a time travel, and maybe I'm just not a time travel girly. I don't know, but it felt the same. The love wasn't there right away, even though that is the point of the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like the old fashioned medieval kind of
Yeah.
style of it that I think comes through. That's where it takes my brain to The Princess Bride, but definitely the time travel aspect of it is like a huge part of this
Hmm.
story. It's the crux of it. The Princess Bride is like one of my childhood stories and it's like weird and funny and like a
Hmm.
totally different vibe, but the dynamic between the two main characters felt like that romantic poetic love
Okay.
that I got in this one. And I do feel like that time travel aspect makes it hard from a storytelling standpoint because you
Yeah.
don't get that world building and tension. Like you are along for the ride with the main character, but as part of the style of writing, there's gaps immediately,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. Let's move on to the hype check. So, this is where we're going to talk about the hype that we got before we read the book, whether it lived up to it or not, and anything that we felt was misleading about The Everlasting.
I think this is hyped up because it is so different from the romantasies that are out there right now. I think the writing is beautiful. I don't want to say better than romantasies now, but a lot of the romantasies that are out now they don't have this like lyrical, poetic type of writing, and that's kind of what I got from The Everlasting. So I think just with the really beautiful writing that was in it, along with the sort of different type of story than what's common right now, there is a reason why there's hype. But for me personally, the story didn't hit the mark for me. So I do feel like it's definitely a me problem. There was just something about it that I didn't click with. I didn't fall in love with their story. I didn't fall in love with their love. And the female main character, I think I was also picturing, what is her name from Game of Thrones? Brienne
Brienne
of
of
Tarth.
Tarth.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I was just picturing her. And I love her in Game of Thrones, but I think she's so powerful in her own. The dynamic between imagining Brienne and then some really shy, nerdy kind of guy. Not that it couldn't happen, but it just was a little bit, the dynamic was odd for me.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I felt like I appreciate that the author is crafting a different relationship dynamic, two very different like archetypes than we typically see in romance. We're not getting
Yeah.
like the broody MMC and like the soft or sassy FMC. We're getting ones that kind of blur some gender norms. And I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, that's cool, but it's just like not hitting for me. And the hype that I was hearing about this book was so much around the yearning and like
Yeah.
the romance. And I get it. To your point, the writing style was like poetic and beautiful. And I really appreciated that too. But it didn't hit on an emotional level for me. It took some things later in the book from like a character arc standpoint to hit, but I really
Yeah.
wasn't invested in their relationship. And I don't know if part of it is because the first, at least third of the book, is really focused on the male main character's point of view. And like you said, he's like kind of shy and nerdy and like bumbly a little
Hmm.
bit. And so I just wanted to understand her more. What does
Yeah.
she want? What's she into? And we weren't getting that. So you had to follow him as he's like, I don't know,
Figuring
chasing
it
after.
out.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It made it tough. So that idea in my head that it was going to be this like great and all encompassing love story, again, it's like a me thing.
Yeah.
It just wasn't my vibe. So for me, it didn't live up to the hype from that standpoint of what I was hearing. And I found that a little misleading. I think if I had heard it talked about as a beautiful fairy tale, then I would have maybe placed it differently in like my head and
Yeah.
expectations.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think that's the main thing. And I love a good yearn. The ones that make your toes curl and you just want to be those characters. And that's the vibe that I got when I watched people talk about this book, was that the yearn was so palpable and I just didn't taste it.
Unfortunately, not. I mean, to your earlier point about the writing style, one thing that I did really appreciate is I think at least what I was kind of picking up from what you were describing in terms of like this as a romantasy versus other romantasy, I felt like Alix E. Harrow was using every word to her advantage. Like
Hmm.
I see in the romantasy space sometimes books that feel like they just needed some editing. They needed to be
Yeah.
culled
Yep.
down a bit and focused. And like this book was focused. And like the word
Yes.
choices were like perfect. She used every word, every page. So I liked that, but yeah, not quite for me. And she didn't give us the POVs in the chapters, which
Yes.
is like super uncommon when you're switching POVs. So you had to figure out who the you was and who the me was in every
Yeah.
chapter. I was rereading things all the
Yeah,
time.
me too.
Yeah. So that's our take on the hype. I do want to get into the romance a bit. So we're still talking spoiler free here. But let's get into the romance in The Everlasting and a bit deeper than what we've been talking about. We touched on this a little bit earlier. For me, this was like a type of romance that was just not really for me. I think even just like the characters, I had a hard time relating to them. That's probably the easiest way to say it. Either of them I didn't connect to.
Yeah, I didn't either. As much as I love a badass, powerful FMC, I think that picture was painted. That's as far as it got for me. I could imagine her as a lady knight, but I didn't feel any connection to anything that she had gone through.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a huge lover of a shy, kind of cowardly MMC. I like MMCs that are more in charge and bossy. So it made it hard for me to connect with Owen as well.
She tried to make him a little bossier in like the spice scenes, which there's minimal spice in here, but there is
Right.
a couple open door scenes. And I found that kind of funny because even in his like bossiness, he's like, you tell me what to do. Like I don't know. It was just like,
Yeah.
I don't know about this. I
I
don't
was
know.
like, not too sure what's going on.
I don't think this is working for me. So,
No.
yeah, I will say that when we got into the later part of the book, like it's kind of hard in my brain. I feel like if I understood Una's backstory earlier, I think I could have connected to things. The same with Owen. We get a better understanding of what happened when he was younger later. And then
Yeah.
there was a better emotional hit for me. So, like, you can't tell someone how to tell their story. But for me personally, I think I needed those pieces earlier on to connect and make the romance mean something because truthfully, I didn't even understand why he was the guy for the
Yeah, I
majority
didn't
of the
either.
story. So I'm like, okay, he likes her, but like, I don't understand how he gets to travel through time. I don't get why they used to meet each other under the tree. Like, I just don't get
Yeah.
any of these
Yep.
things that are being talked about a million times. So it did make it hard.
Yeah, I think the seeds were planted with his little flashbacks of meeting under the tree. And so you sort of were able to grab onto it. But I think because it was just pieced through the story as you were learning versus giving you kind of the backstory to begin with and being able to grow on it, I
Hmm.
think is what didn't hit for me. It made it a little bit choppy and I wanted more as I was learning.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I'm with you for sure. Did anything give you the ick?
I do think the little bits of spiciness that we get because of the dynamic that they had was a little bit of an ick for me, but I think that's just for my own personal preference between the dynamics that I like between characters.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with a sort of like shy golden retriever MMC, and in certain cases I think it works. There are plenty of romance books where I've read more shyer, wants to be told what to do by the FMC, and there are dynamics where I really like it, but this was just a little bit awkward, and I don't know why. Like I honestly
Hmm.
I can't say why because it has worked for me with other books.
Yeah, it's a good point because I feel like I know exactly what you're getting at. Like, I can picture certain scenes, especially early on. She's very brash. She's very
Yes.
much like pushing him off. And so she just gives off this really dislikable energy.
Hmm.
And even that is like okay. But when you've got him being soft and then she's pushing him off and being kind of gruff, yeah, it
Well,
was
and like,
hard.
why is she gruff?
Right.
Yeah, I think if I understood that kind of from the get go before we got to that spot and I was able to understand her backstory a little bit more, I'm kind of, rough sometimes too. Like, I can relate to FMCs that are like that. So if I had her backstory, I may have been able to relate to her more. And then as she softens, you're able to see kind of that arc
Hmm.
going and understanding the backstory of why she's that way. I think would have made it a little bit easier on me to like her.
I think you're right. I think if we'd even gotten like a really short POV of her
Yeah.
early on, as she's going through her own experience. Because for the first part of the book, you only know of Una's experience through Owen's eyes. I think that really would have changed the game because there's a lot to sympathize with when it comes to Una's story. So
100%.
yeah, I think you're right. I think she would have been more relatable if we got to like live in her shoes a little bit.
Yeah, I think when you get closer to the end and you really can understand where Una's coming from, because now you have all of that information, you are able to soften for her, but I don't want to have to read a whole book to be able to feel that way. Now, if this would have been a series or a duology or even a trilogy like that, I would understand, the slow growth of liking characters. I've heard in other series that people can't stand, certain characters in the first book, but then their arc changes their mind, but it's a standalone, and I would have liked to have a little bit more right away in the beginning.
It's also her story. So
Yeah,
to not like her for half the story, even though you're like living through Owen's eyes, it's tough because
it is
it's
tough.
about her.
Yeah.
Yeah. I messaged you about this, but I think one of the things that was putting me off with this couple is like I was definitely getting the Brienne of Tarth vibe, but
Yeah.
even in Game of Thrones, she gets a bit of a romance with the Hound, right?
Yes, she
So
does.
he's this big, broody, misunderstood guy. You can like kind of buy into that. But I was fully picturing not the right ethnicity, but I was picturing Roger from 101 Dalmatians, this like kind of like soft and goofy guy for Owen.
Yeah.
And it was just like, yeah, I'm having a really hard time fitting these two characters
Yeah.
together. Again, from the limited context we get in the first
Yeah.
half of the book.
Right.
As they start to work together, it's easier. I liked them as people as the story went on. I wasn't still really dying for the romance.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So I do think that every book is for someone. So who do you think would like the romance in The Everlasting?
I think definitely if you are somebody that liked Our Infinite Fates, I don't know if you've read that, but the storyline is very different. And in Our Infinite Fates, he is the one that's essentially responsible for her death, and that loop, he's trying to change that loop where in every lifetime he's responsible for it. And so obviously in The Everlasting, he's not responsible. He's just trying to rewrite. I think if you liked that, maybe you're a time travel person and this one would be perfect for that. I think writing wise, if you like an author that describes things without over describing, like I could picture everything really well, and the world building, while small, I could picture things, which is nice. I think in some romantices now, there's just not a lot of description, and so you kind of have to rely on your own imagination for things. And with this one, it was a little bit easier because of the writing. I wouldn't call this YA because of the spice, but it does for me teeter a little bit on YA. If you are a minimal spice reader but still like the fantasy romance, this would be perfect because it is very low on that.
The Princess Bride is like what's stuck in my head.
Yeah.
Really, because I haven't read a lot of classic romance, but I associated this story with that a little bit in the kind of flowery writing style and like the softness of the love and the affection he has for her. It's a type of romance that just like doesn't draw me in. Like we can get there in the romance, but like I want a different type of tension and a build up. So I think if you like that kind of big epic love story where the guy is just pining from day one and he would write you poems and all that, you would love this romance because it is that. It's like with his full chest.
Very green flag.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a great way to describe it. Yeah. Very green flag, MMC. And like it is a unique story, I think. Like that I would for sure give it marks for. Let's talk about the rating.
I have not rated it yet. I'm sitting on it. I think if I really think about it, I do like the writing. I think the premise of the book overall is really good. The storyline is unique. I have not read a book like it, but the romance lacked for me because I didn't connect to the characters, and the characters themselves I didn't connect to. So I'd like to say maybe at least a 3, only because the book overall is really good. If somebody came to me and said, I like X, Y, and Z, and it fit The Everlasting, I would still recommend The Everlasting. But would I go on my socials and rant and rave about this book? No. So I think it's good, but it wasn't great for me. So I think at least a 3, but I'm sitting on it.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I'm going to rate it a 3.5. I think if I had listened to this episode and then I read The Everlasting, I would like it a lot more. I do really think this is one where the hype really hurt me because some of the people that were talking so highly about it, I really trust their opinions. And so many things come into play when it comes to a book experience. So like, I'm
Oh,
not knocking
100%.
them at all. That's like genuinely how they felt, but it put the bar too high for me. And I was reading it thinking like, will I read this book again? And I think like I could maybe in like a while when I am in the mood for something that is also kind of on the borderline between like cozy fantasy and like
Yes, that's a
romantasy,
good one.
because it is a very cozy read. So in the right headspace, I think knowing what it is now, I could enjoy it, but it didn't change my life, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the headspace is a really good point too. I unfortunately am almost never in a cozy fantasy mood. Even if I'm very worn out by romantasy and I just want to read a regular romance, a contemporary or a dark, it's never cozy. So
Yeah.
I think being put on a 5+ star pedestal, I went into that expecting to have my socks blown off, and my socks were very much intact at the end of this book. So I can see how people like it though, but it definitely wasn't for me. There are other more mind-blowing romance stories than this one.
Yeah. Honestly, this is a realization I've had about myself lately. I really want to love cozy fantasy and I don't like them. I get pulled in by like beautiful covers and the ideas of them sound cool. Even like books about books. I'm like, yeah, that sounds adorable. And then I read it and I'm like so bored out of my mind. And I'm
Yeah.
like, where are the stakes? Where is
Yeah.
the romance? So I think where this one won me over was the back half of the book that was
Yeah,
really
that's
more
fair.
about the characters. At least it went somewhere, because there were some parts earlier on that were repetitive, that were really hard for me to be invested in. Like, it's genuinely like kind of the concept. And thankfully the concept shifts to be more tolerable. It's like literally the
Yeah.
framework for the story. So you do get a bit of repetition, and early on I was like, what is this? Like, you're going to make me read these scenes 5 times, but it does shift and it sets the tone for what is room for a lot more creativity. But I felt like I really had to like get through that first.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So before we get into all the spoilers, anything else you want to add? Final thoughts or sentiments for people who haven't read the book?
If there are people that you follow and you really value their opinion and they're raving about this book, I would still give it a go. Clearly, this book has hype for a reason. It is a very well written book, and I could definitely see it being for people. I would still tell people to try it.
What you said earlier, if I knew someone that was into like X, Y, and Z, I would fully recommend this book. And I have
100%.
friends who are reading this book at the same time too. And I'm very curious to see what they're going to think, because it's not a bad book. It just,
No.
if we're really talking about the hype factor, it just didn't live up to the expectations that were
Mhm.
set for me. I wish that I had had a little bit of this context of even what to expect of the romance, because my expectations were very different.
Yeah, I went into my bookish group chat and immediately told them my
Yeah.
opinions because they like a lot of the same stuff that I do and dislike a lot of the same stuff that I do. And not that I'm hard to entertain with reading, but it does take a lot for me to be bored in a book. And I did find myself being bored with the repetition of like the first 60% of the plot.
Hmm.
It was hard to pick up the book in a lot of it and kind of push through. So I did go to the group chat and I did tell them that they probably would not enjoy this book.
Yeah, I think as part of it too is that I don't like books where they're written almost where the author is asking you to just like have faith that it's going to go somewhere.
Mhm.
Like, give me a reason to be invested. Don't make
Yeah,
me
I
just like
need
have
like
to
something to
trust.
cling. Yeah.
Yeah. And even in the earlier parts of the story, when you're getting a bit of that repetition, like Owen doesn't really know what's going on. So you don't know what's going on. So that's where that mindset of like, are we just going to go over this over and over again? And it's
We're
going to be
just doing
leaks.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you just have to trust the process, which you got to really make it worth it, I think, if that's the style of writing. But I mean, again, it does get there. I just can see some of the aspects of the storytelling style and why it was harder for me. Like, if we weren't doing this episode, if we hadn't committed to doing this, I could have for sure just like left it on my bedside table and maybe chipped away at it over a couple months, maybe not finished it. And I'm glad I
Yeah.
did, but like it would have been easy to just like forget about for me.
Yes, if I'm being honest, if I wasn't trying to push through it so you and I could get to a point of having this conversation, I may have DNF'd only because I was bored. Not because the book was bad or the writing was bad. I just was bored.
Yeah. There's a lot of good books to read, right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
things on the TBR that you just want to get to. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. We're going to really get into it now. I feel like we're fully warmed up. So consider this your spoiler warning. Friends, if you haven't read the book, let me know what you think if you do read it or if you're not going to read it, but we're going to get into it. So let's get into the plot, thoughts and feelings on where things went. You go first, Libby.
As far as plot goes, I think it's really interesting. I picked up on something with the woman who ended up being the queen.
Vivian.
Vivian. She was the one that sent him back in time, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I am remembering correctly. So with Vivian, I did pick up something in the beginning. I just caught a vibe that I was like, there's something about her. I don't know why, but she knows things. And in the end, I wasn't much of a huge plot twist for me or like a revelation for me because I did pick it up a little bit. It's like there's something about her. So her ending up being the queen and Una's mom,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of more was like a click for me than a huge mind-blowing take. I don't know what it was, but I was like, she knows something and I can tell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that was a huge thing that if you didn't catch on Vivian in the beginning, then I think that could be a very huge OMG moment. But I did pick up on a little bit of something, like I just caught a vibe.
Mm-hmm.
What maybe that was another reason why I didn't click with the book because there wasn't anything like super wow that happened.
Yeah, I agree. It felt by the end of it, I was like, oh, okay, this is a character story under the guise of this like mission and the time
Mm-hmm.
travel and everything. Cause same, I can't remember at what point. I'm a bit suspicious of most books. I'm
Yeah.
always like, what are you trying to pull over
What's
on
going on?
me? So I was like, I wonder if they're the same person. Or I could tell, I'm like, Vivian doesn't seem like a good person. Like there's all the
Yeah.
kind of the makings of like a questionable character here, especially when she stabs his hand. Like he walks into the office and she's immediately just like stabbing him in the hand.
Yeah.
So I like a female villain. I liked
Yeah,
that
me too.
part of the story. I was kind of like, okay, yeah, she's the queen. That wasn't really groundbreaking. The stuff that got me into the plot truly was like learning about Owen's backstory and the fact that like, his dad actually killed his mom and that he
Yeah.
took him in and changed his whole life. I was like, okay. I knew there was something weird going on with his mom, but I couldn't place what it was. But I really liked that plot development.
Yeah. You kind of throughout the beginning he just has a little bit of flashbacks about somebody that he meets under the yew tree. I thought it was really cute when you found out that it was her that he was meeting underneath the tree. I did have a little bit of susness to that. Like I definitely was like, okay, I feel like this is her. But
Mm-hmm.
it was really cute actually having the confirmation towards the end that wrapped everything up. And so then I was able to connect to the like love story of he was holding on to this memory of meeting her underneath the yew tree, and I think it was really cute. I just wish it didn't take the full book for me to get there.
Yeah, like I'm like figured it was probably her, but I don't understand how their timelines make sense. I don't know that I still understand that part.
I don't know if I understand it either, if I'm being honest.
I totally understand the queen and Una and that whole
Yep.
over all of the centuries. I totally get that. I don't get how Owen is from a different lifetime and gets pulled back. Some of that I was like, I'm not clear on this. I needed a bit more of that world building. I don't know if you'd call it the magic system, but even earlier on, I wanted to understand what the deal was with the book. At the end of the book, they explain that it's grown through the heart of a dragon. And the heart of a dragon has magic. And so they planted it, and that's what grew the yew tree. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay. But again, I'm like, we're like pretty close to the end here to just be understanding
Figuring it
why.
out.
Yeah, there were just points where I felt like if we knew some of these things earlier on, it would have like hooked me in. But I did like the choices, I think. I just didn't necessarily align with when we learned them. I really actually liked the ending. I liked from the point of like when they had the kids, this is like the darkness in me, but when they have the kids and then you're like, oh shit, I don't think this is going to go well. Okay, well, like now I'm engaged because
Yeah.
something's
There's
going to
more at
happen to these
stake.
kids. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the stakes of it. And I agree. Like overall, every part of the book I did like. I just don't know if it needed to be, for me to be reordered, and where we were kind of getting backstory more at the beginning of the book than having it all wrapped up towards the end. I think the kids obviously wouldn't have happened until the end, and that makes sense timeline wise. But yeah, I think I did like the kids part now that you bring that up too. And I think it's also because there were more stakes. Okay, now we finally gotten to the end and we know that they are together and they have children. Now what's going to happen? Like just waiting for the shoe to drop.
And there's like a different conflict because they've been like making these choices more or less like against Vivian, but like now if they don't rewrite the story in a way that gets them to have kids, they already had them and they have to sacrifice that.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden the dynamic has shifted to be a lot more human. I think that they could have explained the whole part of the dragon and the yew tree
Yeah.
earlier on and then had a penny drop at the end. That the whole thing with like Owen dying and then her putting the seed in him and then the yew tree growing, that was really cool. And like
Yeah.
everything really came together here. But again, it took till the end for me to be like, oh, how magical that that all played out that way.
Yeah. I think this timeline in a movie would have hit for me 100%. But for some reason, in a written format of it, I think was too confusing. But I think if I was able to visualize certain things, I do think it would have been a little bit better, which is just so interesting that when I think of it in a movie, I think it would have been fine.
I agree with you. I thought of that while I was reading it too, especially when I was getting a little frustrated. I thought the same. I thought like, I don't think this would bother me, like reliving certain memories. If I
Yeah.
was watching the movie, I think I would be okay with it because you'd get like a montage and you'd still get the experience of Owen having to like
Hmm.
go into these memories, knowing he lived them before and knowing he probably knows how it's going to end. I think it would hit really different.
Yeah. Especially with the magic thing too. And just, I think that would have been a huge revelation for me watching it as a movie of like, oh shit, that's really cool. You know, that makes sense of why this happened in the beginning.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it would make a good movie. We'll see. I think she's got like a good foundation. I
I
could
just
see
think it
it.
would have been, it'd be like a good classic fantasy romance movie. It's fantasy, but like Wuthering Heights, you know,
hmm
it's a really classic old timey romance and it's set back in time. And I think so many people love it because it is a really classic yearn. And so I think I would have probably felt the yearn in the everlasting in a movie version in the same way. And I think the magic would have added a little cherry on top too of just making it a lot more mind blowing.
Even the emotional scenes when everything's going on with the kids and like Vivian shows up and she's gonna kill Owen, that would have like ruined
I
me.
would have
If
been
I was
ruined.
if
Yeah,
that was
I
a
would have been
movie.
like, oh my God, no.
Yeah, to like see the kids. And so I think it's hard to pinpoint, but like her writing style was beautiful, but it didn't
Yeah.
have the emotional depth that I wanted. And those are scenes that like that could have destroyed me if it was written different.
Yeah, I think just adding in the ability to see characters' facial expressions and the little scenery bits, I think that you just have to rely on your own imagination for. But I think seeing it and watching it, especially as a certified empath, I think I would have been done for.
Yeah, I think we're onto something here. Let's talk a little bit more about the ending because we've talked a lot about the things we didn't love, which is fair. How did you feel by the end of the book? Once you finished it, how did you feel about the ending and the journey to get there?
The ending for me made the journey a little more worth it because there were more stakes and there was more that was happening that was keeping my attention. I think if I would have been really disappointed with the ending, I think it just would have I would have felt like about the whole book. So I think the way that it wrapped up, even though I don't love how we got there, and it was hard for me to want to be in it until the end, I think that's ultimately probably what helps my rating be more positive is I do like the way everything was wrapped up.
Yeah, I agree. I think my only criticism on the ending was, and maybe a little bit throughout like the back third of the book, there were just like moments where I was like, why are they not killing this woman? I feel like there are opportunities to take her out. And
Yeah.
like felt like, okay, well, they're not killing Vivian in this scene where she's like unveiling everything about her own trauma and
Yeah.
backstory and
Yeah.
everything. They're not killing her right now because they want her to kill Owen. Like from a narrative standpoint,
Yeah.
they need Owen to die to make the next thing happen, but it like logically didn't make sense to me that like you're just like letting her talk. You're just going to like let her
Yeah.
kill your
Just
husband.
listening. Yeah.
But I'm like, sometimes you got to give the authors. I
Yeah.
give, you do you, and like we'll get to the ending in the right way.
Yeah.
But that was my one thing that I was like, realistically, like, wouldn't you have just taken her out? Because she's a child.
Yeah. And you could have figured out a way to get Owen where he needed to be without her.
Yeah.
now that you had the information.
Like you wouldn't have had to wait like decades under the tree for him to be reborn, but it was cool. It was cool that you did
Yeah.
that. Yeah. But otherwise I did like it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the decoding thing. So did you figure out the name?
I think so. I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't know if it's Ula,
Right. I
but
think so.
I think so. I also he mentioned somewhere, I can't remember if it was in the beginning or more towards the middle. Didn't he mention that her favorite flowers were Ulas?
I think so.
I
I
thought so.
think,
Okay.
yeah, I think there's a connection to that and Vivian. Like Vivian always has these flowers and they grew near the
Well,
tree.
okay. Which is also kind of interesting. Like, I think it would have been cuter if he knew it was her favorite flower or just with the flowers under the tree. But I feel like knowing what you know in the end about Vivian, like, why are you wearing perfume that smells like her flower?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how to feel about this whole name decoding thing. I was like reading it and then I was like, wait a minute. I think I'm supposed
I
to
just
like
feel like
do
why?
something. Yeah, even throughout, it was like, I don't know that I like need this piece of information. Like I do want it now that you're like intentionally redacting it from the
Yeah.
book, but I also found the name pretty unimpactful personally.
It's for me too close to
Yeah,
Una.
but it was like fun. I was like, okay, there's a game tied into
Yeah.
the end of this
Yeah.
book. But when he was saying, "Oh, and maybe I'll just put the name in here one time," I was thinking he was just going to write it, and then I realized, like, oh no, he's did his little like name decoder thing in here.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if that was from an author standpoint, if that was a way to try to keep the reader engaged. Like there was some sort of a mystery throughout the book that you were trying to figure out. But I agree. I kind of was like, okay.
Yeah, it was.
And that's that's her name and that's great. I don't know why we couldn't have just known that from the beginning. There are other books where you read a lot of the story thinking that or not really knowing their name. It's just a nickname or something like that. And then finding out towards the end, but there's a reason why it was a secret and it's just this huge like, leads into the next book.
Mhm.
I didn't get that. Like there wasn't a reason for it. And there wasn't anything super meaningful about the name either. I think like, they hid it because it was a long, I don't know, family name or something. But yeah, I didn't feel the importance of it.
I think if the memories of him and a girl under the tree had been leaned into more and made distinct from Una somehow, where we thought that he had his
Yeah,
own
that's a good
memories under
point.
the tree, and then we come to realize that, oh no, it's the same person and that's her
Yeah, that's
name.
a really good point.
But it wasn't that. It just, I don't know, it just was like, oh, that's cute.
Actually would have really liked that, I think. He's just talking about the girl that he used to meet under the yew tree, and her name was Ula. And then later you've now made that connection that it's Una, and then it all makes sense of why he's trying to help her and rewrite her story. Like, yeah, I wonder if that would have changed for me. That's actually super cute.
Yeah, I think your point about them being really similar, though, that's a bit of a pet peeve of mine with books is characters with two similar names, it confuses me.
Yeah, me
And
too.
I think in this case, it would have been more fun if they were different. And even if she had left out the detail that Vivian gives her a nickname, she calls her Una as like her one. I don't know. If I were a mom and I had a child and I named them Ula and then like abandoned them for years and then I came back to them, would I give them a nickname that is like two letters off from the name I gave them? Like, I
Yeah.
don't know, you know? Maybe it would be a cuter, different name. I don't know. Just, I liked the effort, but it just
Yeah.
didn't quite land. I'm really curious what the listeners thought of that little detail in there because I do think it's like kind of fun, but it just didn't have the impact that I was hoping.
I wonder if it would have been more difficult because I didn't listen to it via audio, that the people that are audiobook listeners, I wonder if they even caught on to that because I think that would
Hmm.
be really hard. And then I don't know how they presented that in the audiobook because the word on paper is literally redacted. Like in the audiobook, are they just saying blah 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 redacted, or are they leaving just a blank, you're just not speaking the word? I think it would have been worse for me because I wouldn't have received that information.
That's a really good point. One of my friends is doing the audiobook. So I'm going to ask her because also the end, it took me a second to figure out the punctuation thing.
Yep.
And I don't
Me
know
too.
how that would have been presented. I needed to read it like 3 times to get
Yeah.
what was going on.
They don't speak punctuation in audiobooks. It's the way that they're speaking that you're kind of catching on that the sentence has ended. Like, are they saying period? I
They
think
like
I don't think I would have gotten it. Yeah,
a
dash.
dash
Yeah.
this apostrophe. Yeah. I'm really curious now. That's like a really good point. I was really thinking like this would probably be a good audiobook because I feel like the production would be good, but like that's a really good point.
I'm like imagining listening to it. I would not have caught on.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask my friend and then I'm gonna put in the comments what her
Yes.
experience was because I feel like it'd be very different.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, well, that's all I have. Super cathartic. I'm glad we did this.
Yes, me too.
So that's a wrap on this episode of Quick Lit. And since this book didn't give us the obsessive buddy reading experience we were really hoping for, Libby is going to come back and co-host on another episode with a very different read. So stay tuned for more details on our redemption episode. But for now, this is one of my favorite parts of every episode, which is announcing the next Quick Lit book pick. And this one is a bit of a throwback. This book was chosen on the Fantasy Femme Fatale spinning wheel last year, and we just didn't get to it. But the sequel, A Forbidden Prophecy, is releasing in just a few months on July 21st. So next episode, I'm going to have a new co-host joining me, and we're going to dish on A Forbidden Alchemy. And I've heard this one is very Peaky Blinders coded and a totally different romantasy vibe. Have you read this one, Libby?
No. My friend, if I'm allowed to talk about my friends on here, my friend Brooklyn has read that and she really, really liked it. So it has been on my TBR, but this is one of those other sort of, it's very popular on socials and I have seen nothing but good things. So I'm really excited for you and you will have to let me know because I think that will determine maybe whether or not I actually read it.
Yeah, well, you know we're going to be real about it. I feel the
Yeah.
same. I feel nervous and I feel excited. So I'm always hoping for the best. So if you haven't read A Forbidden Alchemy, now is a great time to pick it up. And if you have, the next episode is going to be a perfect recap heading into book 2. And if you want a cool ass group to read with, you can join the Fantasy Femme Fatale's book club on Fable. There's over 70 of us on there now. We read the upcoming book ahead of the next episode release. And as always, I want to hear from you listeners. If you have any books you'd love to see on the podcast, drop your recs in the comments and let me know what you think the next hyped and hot take worthy read that deserves some Fantasy Femme Fatales coverage is. And until then, this is Fantasy Femme Fatales and we're out.